Ready. Play.
We had two women's quarterfinals today. We had Aryna Sabalenka emerging in straight sets over Qinwen Zheng in the first match of the day. This was straight sets, but I think for Qinwen, some regrets. In her press conference afterwards, she regretted her lack of aggression during the match, maybe at decisive moments. She did have the first set on her racket and the bit between her teeth when she's up a break. When she cedes that break, you do fear for her. It does eventually go to a tie break. And then, yeah, probably after that tie break, it did have a sense of inevitability behind it, but it was still close.
I am so blown away that she thinks that she was not aggressive enough, because
Okay.
I was watching that match and I thought, wow, both these players, and they are power players, they're power servers, power ball strikers. I thought, wow, they're really hitting clean balls for the most part and really going after it, really committing. She Kinwin also said something about errors. She was mad at herself for making errors, and she did spray some in the second set. But here's what I would say to her. Look at the second serve points.
Okay.
Her second serve is weaker than Sabalenka's, and Sabalenka teed off on returns. And if she didn't hit an outright winner on the second serve return, she set herself up to win the point very, very quickly. So I think Zheng is going to have to address that aspect of her game, because her first serve is great. It's top 5 on tour probably. So yeah.
I mean, sometimes tennis players' assessment can be skewed by one or two things. They're annoyed, they're frustrated, they don't necessarily know exactly what's going on necessarily around them. They do get feelings. She may even just have 1 point in mind, 2 points in mind. And to be honest with you, 1 or 2 points in that match could well have gone 3 sets. And that might be as simple as that, because if she's spraying things around a bit in the unforced errors category, that's not necessarily down to a lack of aggression. You also pointed out how unerring she was at times during the first set, but it might just be 1 point that she's thinking of in particular in the tiebreak or when she got broken. But yeah, I mean, the matchup with Sabalenka until Rome had appeared to be a problem, but then I did think that she was, when the first win was going to come for Qinwen, it would almost certainly come on clay. And that did happen. So then going into the match today, I thought it was a close one. You know, we talked about percentages before. Maybe I was 55-45 for Aryna, but any kind of result wouldn't have surprised me. And a Qinwen Zheng certainly not victory. But it is Aryna Sabalenka who's into a Grand Slam semifinal again, which is so consistent, so incredible. One of the few that she's missed out on, of course, was a year ago when she was in a quarterfinal, and really that was a close one with Mila Andreeva. But a word on the consistency of Sabalenka.
She has improved her shot tolerance. She has improved her movement on clay. She has improved her drop shot. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. In the match today, I think I read a stat that she was 10 for 10 on drop shot
Okay.
attempts, and
Okay.
with four of those being winners outright. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you go out to a tennis court, you try to hit 10 drop shots that land in the court.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
actually hard to do that. And it was windy. It was gusty out
Yes.
there. I mean, that was another thing. With her power, she can just kind of hit through the wind, which she did, and she flattened, which helps. But yeah, Sabalenka is just becoming more and more a complete player every day.
I spoke to Gavin McMillan in September last year, just after Aryna won the US Open. Gavin McMillan is somebody who joined her team about 2.5, 3 years ago when she was having some of the travails with her serve. And Gavin, I interviewed him in September of last year. But actually one element to that interview was how Gavin was really enthusiastic about some of the things that Aryna had added to her game in 2024 to make her more of a threat across the 3 surfaces, and maybe not just in Australia or even not just in New York. So therefore on clay and certainly on grass as well, which is a season that was heavily disrupted. She had to pull out of Wimbledon last year with I think it was a back injury. But yes, adding the drop shot was something that they worked on, I think, in the off season of 23-24. And she's bearing fruits now. And she's the one. It's not going to happen this year, but she's the one who I always begin every year thinking, if someone's going to win the calendar slam, it's going to be her, because she's so good on grass and she's so good on the hard courts and so consistent. And it's just French Open. I always thought that Iga might be a barrier too much for her in terms of at least getting the career slam. But here we are, French Open semi-final, exact same stage as she was 2 years ago when she lost to Mukova when she had a match point as well.
And yeah, I mean, I got really close last year of making the finals of French Open, like really close, still probably hurting, but it's okay. I always say we're not losing, we're learning. I mean, I think that experience was really important for me to learn a lot of stuff, and hopefully this year I can do a little bit better.
I mean, that loss to Mukova in the semi-final, sounds like it still hurts. How can you use that, like during this season now in Stuttgart and onwards, to maybe fuel some success in Paris?
Well, I think if I make it to the same stage of the tournament and I'm gonna stay there on 5-2-30 live, I'm gonna stay there thinking like, no fucking chance I'm gonna do this. I'm sorry, there's no way I can say it differently, but this is exactly how I'm gonna stay there thinking that no, not this time.
Yeah. Anything more on Sabalenka before we sort of move over to her opponent?
I mean, the matchup is really interesting given where the two players are at this point in their career. Sabalenka is a little bit older, but she's peaking. And Swiatek is getting over this controversy and trying to get her confidence back after a poor clay season, certainly by her standards. So I think, it's like the curious case of Benjamin Button. They're meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's should make for a fantastic match.
Iga Swiatek coming through earlier on today in straight sets over Aryna Svitolina. I thought the Svitolina game plan was the right one, to be a bit more aggressive, especially on return. I felt the scoreline in the first set didn't do Aryna much justice. It was 6-1, but she had breakpoint opportunities on a couple of games of Iga's one game in particular. I think it was a 12-minute game, and she had a return of serve that really she should be making, and I know she was disappointed with that. The second set, she continued the same sort of philosophy and she stuck to the plan, even if it necessarily didn't bear fruits in the first set, and nearly forced a tie break. And then who knows? But ultimately, there was just maybe too many variables for Aryna to win that match, to go her way, at least on the clay of Châtelet. We've seen Aryna obviously beat Iga at Wimbledon in the past, and I think if that was on grass, we may well have seen a different result. But I said, by the way, about 3 days ago, when we knew that we were going to get Rybakina or Ostapenko against Swiatek in round 4, I said this match against Rybakina or Ostapenko, as it turned out, it was Rybakina. This is going to define her French Open and even define her, clay court season, and maybe even define her year. Now, she may lose to Aryna Sabalenka, but it's now a sort of more okay stage that Wim Fissette maybe doesn't have to worry about being fired, and Iga can at least say that the form is coming back because of the performance she showed in sets 2 and 3 against Rybakina, and then again against Svitolina. But that was the one that I circled. She won it in incredible manner. She then won in straight sets today. And yeah, just a word on Iga's sort of form and where she's at right now.
2 things with Iga that I've noticed. One, her serve is just getting a tiny bit better. I
Okay.
noticed that, the way she closed out the match today with a couple of aces, her top line number, you'll have to do the conversion for me. It's 116 miles per hour,
At
whatever that is.
160 kilometers an hour, I think. Something like
Okay.
that. 116 miles an hour, yeah?
So that was her top line. Her average was maybe around 106.
Or a bit more, 186 kilometers an hour. So there we go.
So it's inching up there. I mean, if you look at her
Yeah.
speeds from a few years ago, it's way up. But even from, maybe 12 months ago, it's just inching up. So this was a good serve performance from Iga, I thought. And I like her backhand. I noticed that Svitolina seemed to have a game plan to rally to the backhand. I mean, who wouldn't against
Hmm.
Iga?
Yeah, yeah. If you've
And,
got two, yeah.
even though, sometimes Iga's gonna run around and look for forehand, and she did that because she moves beautifully. Iga did have to hit a lot of backhands, maybe more than usual. But the backhand held up so well. Not only did she have some winners off of that wing,
Hmm.
but she also defended it very well. She's got the sliding Novakian open stance backhand, which she uses on defense, and it looked superb today. So slightly improved serve and backhand as a defensive tool being used very well for Iga.
I think even in those three early rounds, straight sets wins, there were some signs that we were looking at a better Iga Swiatek than what we'd seen throughout the clay season, which had looked very shaky, and none more so perhaps than in that loss to Daniel Collins in Rome. That felt like rock bottom. And as I say, whatever happens now, that will be the rock bottom moment in her year, I think, because even if she was to lose to Aryna, not that she'd be thinking that way right now, but even if she was, then at least this is a bit more, back to the Iga that we know. But I think also something I said pre-tournament, that there is this kind of Rafa effect, Rafa theory, whatever. We heard Alexander Zverev say in a press conference a couple of years ago that Rafa's forehand sort of has another couple of spins per, whatever it is, RPMs, and a bit more speed here on Philippe Chatrier. And he does seem to just grow another inch or two taller. And I think even though Iga's a mini version of that, bearing in mind she's still got 10 more French Opens to win before she matches his 14 haul, there is also an Iga Paris factor that I think just gives her another 1 or 2% chance of winning tennis matches here.
Yeah, that's true. I was thinking, if I were in her shoes and I'm coming off this big stress that she had with the positive test,
Mm-hmm.
and Rafa is my idol, and this was the year that Rafa was honored, and now his footprints on the court. Like, how is she going to respond to that? If it were me, I'd be a nervous wreck, But I think it's a testament to her work that she's put in on the mental game, that she's taking it as inspiration, and she's having sort of a renaissance, as it were, in Chatrier.
So next on the horizon is without a doubt her biggest test so far, as much as Rybakina was. Rybakina, that sort of match, also had some feelings, at least, like the Naomi Osaka match that she had last year, of just how close she was to going out. There were obviously differences in the matchup there, and there were differences in that Naomi had a match point, but just how close she was and on the brink there, very much, and also in an early-ish round like it was against Naomi last year. But now she's going to have Aryna Sabalenka. These have been the two best players on tour for the last 3 years. They have been, as well as Coco Gauff has done, and a few others that we've mentioned already on this show. These are the two. If you look at a 3-year block from about, say September anyway, 2022, or even the French Open of 22, and all the way to now, it's these two just ahead of everyone. They've won multiple slams between them, of course, across the surfaces, not Wimbledon between them, but it's also 1,000 days. I think it'll be 1,000 days to the day when they play each other since they last met at a Grand Slam, and that was 2022 US Open semifinal. It was a match that I was at, was kind of on Aryna's racket. I think she was a breakup in the third. It was a really, really top match. This is pre sort of rivalry, if you like, sort of 2022, but the rivalry's obviously developed a lot with those two Madrid finals and how competitive they have been. And there's been a lot of talk over the last 12 months. When are they going to meet in a slam final? Well, not a slam final, but the next best thing, slam semifinal. 8-4, Iga leads the head-to-head. But there's been a few bruising losses, I think, that Aryna's inflicted on Iga in the last 12 months. We obviously had the one in Cincinnati. Anyway, that's the one in particular I'm thinking about. But on clay, does swing it back towards Iga. And if we look at how close they are in Madrid, 50-50 in Madrid, probably, you know, Aryna's
1-1 probably.
Right, exactly. And Aryna's best environment on clay in terms of she gets a bit more pop on that incredible serve that she has there. She's obviously a multiple Madrid champion, including this year. Iga's amazing movement doesn't change much there, but there's other aspects to her game that probably don't, do as well in Madrid, and yet she still managed to get over the line in that epic match that they had last year. What are your thoughts going into this encounter?
I think that conditions could come into play, and this as well, if the forecast can be believed, that it might rain and they might have to close the roof. And, it's just going to be harder to put Iga away. And if you can move Aryna and you can get her frustrated, then, she's just going to go for every ball. So you can get errors off of her. I think Iga would be smart to just play a very disciplined match and see where that takes her given the conditions. Because it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to hit winners if the conditions are super heavy.
The match I'm thinking of indoors when it was raining outside was Rafa against Zverev in 22, the semifinal, which was just going to, if Zverev, of course, unfortunately got injured, but if it wasn't for that, we could have been looking at a 6 or 7 hour match because neither could.
Before he got injured, remember how frustrated he was, Zverev?
Yeah.
He was so upset that he could not put the ball away.
I know Rafa sweats. I was also at this match too. I know Rafa sweats too, but honestly, his whole outfit was just stuck to him because it was humid and really, really muggy. And as you said, in the second set, I think Zverev was constantly going up a break and getting broken back. And then they're on serve, and obviously they go into I think it's just on the verge of what was going to be a tie break probably, and that's when Zverev got injured. But there was the epic tie break they had in the first set that many people also remember, but they just couldn't hit through each other. And as you say, Zverev, despite having such a big serve, he wasn't getting anything on that serve that particular day. And yeah, it might. Well, of course you've got some similarities, Iga being Rafa in this dynamic, Aryna maybe being a bit more like Zverev in this dynamic. So I think this is too close to call, though. Indoors or outdoors, rain or otherwise. I don't know. I'm getting the vibe, though, that you're going to lean Iga.
Well, I did pick Iga to make the final. I actually picked Coco Gauff to win the tournament.
Okay.
I had picked Zheng to be in the semifinal, so I got that wrong. But she had a shot.
For sure.
So I like to stick with what I went with because I like to think I'm smart. But no, I'll stick with Iga just based on the performance I saw against Svitolina.
Yeah, and also the Rome win that she had last year. Rome is a bit more like Paris than Madrid is, and Stuttgart as well as obviously being an indoor clay tournament. I mentioned that bruising win, if you like, it was such an easy win is what I mean by that Sabalenka had, but that was in Cincinnati. Also, I just think that these last two matches in particular for Iga have put some of the doubts that she's been having, because you could see it in her performances and on the court, going down a set and a break to Alex Ayala, as impressive as Alex was in Madrid. I saw Alex close up in Portugal at a 1-2-5 on clay, and she just can't really move that well on this surface. And I was shocked to say, I don't know how Iga went down a set and a break in that match, but then she comes back, but then she goes out to Coco and Coco crushes her. She then loses to Daniel Collins and hasn't been in a final, Amy, since the French Open of last year. That's not including the United Cup. It's obviously a team event, and she does get to the last match, if you like, or the last tie. But, in terms of an individual event, she's not been in a final since the French Open, which for her is insane.
I really thought that she would take a title during the clay season, or at least, have a really good showing on clay leading up
Me
to
too.
this.
Yeah, me too.
And she didn't. But
No.
here she is. So
Yeah.
that's why I said this last performance against Svitolina, because I watched it really closely today, and to me, she looked as close as she has looked here in Paris.
I agree. And I tell you what, I'm not saying you've talked me into it, because I thought we might get an Iga back to sort of normal-ish levels. I still think, you said you had Qin Wen to make the semis, and to be honest with you, there's 5 or 6 players. Mira Andreeva's obviously in this group as well. Coco, who you've already mentioned, Aryna, of course, and Iga. Any sort of permutation amongst those in terms of the size of the draw, and you got those in the final. They're all very rational picks.
Yes.
I saw those 5 or 6 players as sort of a little bit ahead of the next level, which will be Paolini, Svitolina, and maybe even Ostapenko on her day. That was the bunch, and I went for Iga to brush off the cobwebs, and I think I might have gone for. I didn't actually do a bracket, but as in like conversations I was having pre-tournament, I was like, listen, when you just don't have any idea, in a way, and Iga is still in the conversation, then go with Iga, and I'm going to do the same on Friday. I just hope, or sorry, Thursday. I just hope we get a classic, and if they can produce anything like they've produced in Madrid over the last couple of years, then we're in for a treat.
I think so, and this may be, with the handful of players that you mentioned, this may be one of those circumstances where the women's game is slightly more compelling. It goes in
Definitely.
waves. It goes in waves. So I encourage people to tune in for these last few matches.
Yeah, definitely. 5 or 6 contenders on the women's side, and 2 on the men's. Albeit,
don't forget about Djokovic.
I know that's the one, and obviously Zverev too to some extent. But it's two that were way ahead of everyone else going into the tournament. But it may change as the tournament has evolved, and the further Novak goes, of course, the more he has to come into the conversation. But at least, just pre-tournament, certainly pre-Geneva anyway, so a week before the tournament, when the guys were all turning up doing their warm-ups and practices in Paris a week before, it was like, these 2 guys are way ahead of the field. Novak says, don't forget about me, wins his title number 100, gets his match win number 100. So, yeah, he's still there, but at least, listen, Novak can go on and win the title, but right now, there's 2 players ahead of everyone else on that side, whereas I still have no idea who's winning the Women's French Open, because all of these girls that we just mentioned, all these women that have all delivered until now. Now, they're going to start to knock each other out, but whoever goes on to win this title, if it's Mira Andreeva against Coco Gauff in one semifinal, for example, or Madison Keys perhaps as well. I mean, Boisson has been one of the stories of the tournament, but you'd imagine that will end at some point. But Madison Keys, by the way, is still on for a potential calendar slam, but I think she could lose every match for the rest of the year, and her year has still been off the charts great. But yeah, it's whoever wins it is what I'm saying is, let's say Iga wins this, beating Svitolina in the quarters. Before that, Rybakina, semi-final, Sabalenka, and either Mira Andreeva or Coco Gauff in the final. Wow, that would be a hell of a run to the title. And yeah, I guess I'm 51%, 49 in favor of her over Sabalenka, and then she's in the French Open final where she's never lost before at that point.
Let's say in 3. How about that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, 51-49 is a 3-setter. Yes. Anyway, listen, big thanks, Amy, for coming on today.
Absolutely. It's always fun. Anytime.
And for sure, people will watch this back, maybe post-match, and see what things we got right and what things we got wrong. But that's all part of the fun and drama. So once again, Amy, thanks very much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And to everybody else, you know the drill. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on all things tennis.